नमस्ते व्यूअर्स, दर्शकों को स्वागत है। हमेशा की तरह मैं विभूति झा हूँ। ये है जयपुर डायलॉग यूएस से। और आज हम आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे पूर्ववत हमेशा की तरह प्लीज लाइक, सब्सक्राइब एंड सपोर्ट आवर चैनल, गिव योर फीडबैक। आज की चर्चा हम इस बात से करेंगे कि आप जैसे देख रहे हैं, इंडिया इज अंडर इंसेसेंट अटैक, क्रमशः जारी है। भारत पे हर तरह का हमला हो रहा है, आर्थिक, राजनीतिक, स्पिरिचुअल, धार्मिक, हर तरह का भारत पे हमला हो रहा है। ऐसा लगता है कि कोई न कोई भारतीयों को और धार्मिक प्रवृत्तियों को और सनातन का नाश करना चाहता है। लेकिन हमने हमेशा यहाँ कहा है, इस जयपुर डायलॉग यूएसए पे और जयपुर डायलॉग मेन पे भी, कि दिस सेंचुरी बिलोंग्स टू अस एंड वी हैव टू टेक द मैसेज फॉरवर्ड। एंड इन द प्रॉपर एनालिसिस ऑफ शत्रु बोध एंड पूर्व पक्ष, we have to know where did we miss out, what we did not do, and what do we must do to go forward. तो आज इस बात की चर्चा हम करेंगे। हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं दूसरी बार प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर कुंदन सिंह जी, जो कि नमस्कार नमस्कार, और जो कि यू नो सोफिया यूनिवर्सिटी में प्रोफेसर हैं। और उन्होंने बहुत ही जबरदस्त किताब लिखी है जिसके बारे में हमने चर्चा अपने शो पे की है कुंदन जी के साथ और कृष्णा माहेश्वरी, जो सेकंड ऑथर हैं। इस किताब को मैं आपको फिर से दिखाना चाहता हूं। ये रही वो किताब, कॉलोनियल डिस्कोर्स एंड द सफरिंग ऑफ इंडियन अमेरिकन चिल्ड्रन। हालांकि ये किताब जो है स्पेसिफिकली रेफर्स टू इंडियन अमेरिकन चिल्ड्रन, बट इट्स रेलेवेंस इज ग्लोबल टू एवरीवन इन द वर्ल्ड, एवरी इंडियन पेरेंट एंड एवरी इंडियन चाइल्ड। सो कुंदन जी, आज मैं आपसे इस बात से शुरू करूंगा चर्चा कि श्री अरविंदो, क्यों ये मेरा एक हमेशा से रहा है कि हमारा इतिहास, हमारा इतना अलौकिक इतिहास है, लेकिन हम इतने त्रस्त कैसे हुए? हाउ वेर वी डिमोलिश्ड? क्या हुआ कि हम इतने डिमोलिश हुए? और हम हमेशा इस बात की चर्चा करते रहते हैं कि कहां से आया। और देन आई हैड रेड द आर्टिकल बाय श्री अरविंदो. That article, ladies and gentlemen, is available free on internet. You can Google it, and I would urge you, want you, request you most humbly to read it. Not for my benefit, but for your benefit. If you are interested in the rise of Hindus and Sanatan for what it is. That article was written in 1907 by Sri Aurobindo. That article was also banned for a long while until it was reestablished, refurbished, and put back again. That article's name is The Bourgeois and the Samurai. The Bourgeois and the Samurai. आप सिर्फ पहला पेज पढ़े उस आर्टिकल का। अगर आपकी आंखें न खुली तो अब मैं कहूंगा कि आप जन्मजात अंधे हैं, and you don't have brains. And I say this with a challenge to you, my viewers, कि अगर जागरूकता चाहिए, शत्रुबोध और पूर्व पक्ष चाहिए, तब इस आर्टिकल को पढ़ना पड़ेगा। So over to you, कुंदन जी। आप श्री अरविंदो के भी फॉलोअर हैं
जी।
और तो मैं इस बात की चर्चा करना चाहूंगा कि बताएं कि bourgeois and the samurai, what happened?
Thank you, Vibhuti ji, for inviting me again to your platform. It's wonderful to have this conversation, to say the least. So you spoke to your viewers about the book. Now, interestingly, this book is not only important for the parents of children, or rather Indian children, everywhere in the world. The first 4 chapters of this book are relevant for India and Hindu studies everywhere in the world. And sometimes, you don't really plan things, and things happen. I want to dive in right into this wonderful book that Shri Aurobindo has written called The Foundations of Indian Culture. And
Based on your recommendation, I got it too.
wonderful,
Yes, and
wonderful.
this book is pretty remarkable. I wanted to talk about that later,
Yes,
but you can go ahead.
yes. The divine will unfold the sequence of the conversation. So so in this particular book, Sri Aurobindo refuted a particular British journalist by the name of William Archer. And this book predominantly was written between 1916 and 1920. I also want to inform uh, your viewers that Sri Aurobindo wrote 7 of his books simultaneously. They were written as chapters for the journal Arya, which was started in 1916. And most of the writings of Sri Aurobindo happened between 1916 and 1920. So this British journalist, he took upon himself to write a book in which he trashed India, the Indian civilization, the Indian traditions, Hinduism, Indian history completely. Sri Aurobindo did his Purva Paksha and wrote a refutation. That is what that book is all about. Now, interestingly, without my planning it, I wrote my book, and much after the completion of the book, I realized that the first 4 chapters of my book basically go into the institutionalization of the discourse that William Archer had reflected in his writings. So, to unfold this further, I would like to add here that there is a very intimate connection between the writings of William Archer, which happened in early 20th century, and the writings of James Mill, which happened in early 19th century. So when William Archer wrote his book, the discourse of James Mill on India and Hinduism had already become institutionalized. It was part of the British culture. And that is what Sri Aurobindo refuted in his book, The Foundations of Indian Culture. Now, let's come to the article that you were talking about, the bourgeois and the samurai. Now, I personally feel that in India, Sri Aurobindo has not been read properly. A large part of this is because of the policies that Congress took after India's independence. And suppression of Sri Aurobindo's writings was definitely a part of it, because Sri Aurobindo was made completely invisible within the Indian scheme of things. The first 28 years of my life I spent in India. And without tooting my own horn, I would consider myself a fairly voracious reader. But it was only towards the end of my 28 years of my stay in India that I actually came across the writings of Sri Aurobindo. That was the extent of suppression that has happened. The leftist scholars definitely contributed in a major way towards his suppression. Bipin Chandra, in one of his books, calls Sri Aurobindo a coward who left the Indian freedom struggle and went to Pondicherry to do his sadhana. This is a complete misrepresentation of facts. Now, there are connections. Why he was suppressed. His writings, right from the very beginning, have been very powerful with regards to Renaissance in India. Just to give, a few more factoids to your viewers, Shri Aurobindo was born in 1872. And by the time he was 7, he, along with his brothers, was sent to Britain by his Anglophile father to get educated. Shri Aurobindo, after deliberately failing himself in the Indian Civil Services examination, came back to India at the age of 21. This is 1893, and he started serving the state of Baroda. He was working for the Maharaja of Baroda. Right after he came back, he wrote a few articles under the title New Lamps for the Old for this journal Indu Prakash, which was run by one of his colleagues in Britain. This article was a scathing critique of what the Indian National Congress, which had already come into existence, was engaging in. Just imagine 1893, when no one was talking about the complete independence of India. Shri Aurobindo wrote about it. It took Congress another 37 years to make complete independence of India its national program. So he was that, far-sighted, and he was that revolutionary. In fact, the writing was so powerful that his colleague asked him to tone down the tenor of his enunciations. Now, Sri Aurobindo, very soon became part of the Indian freedom struggle. 1905 happened when the partition of India took place. And this article, the samurai, the bourgeois and the samurai, was written in 1907, which is around the same time that the agitation was going on. And we'll talk more about this article. I would like to have your views as well. What is it that Shri Aurobindo is talking about? Shri Aurobindo is critiquing the colonized mind. And once again, he is completely scathing. This is much before any of the anti-colonial or post-colonial authors had come onto the horizon. Once again, he was that far-sighted. So who is the bourgeois that Shri Aurobindo is addressing in this particular article? It is basically the Bhadralok, of Bengal. The people who considered themselves civilized, but they were the people who were basically serving the British machinery. And they were not really interested in India's independence. They were not really interested in finding out the truths of the Indian culture. Over to you, Vibhuti, to shed more light on the article.
No, actually, you are a professor and done sincere work on it, and the purpose is to bring together, knit together, your book, which is talking about John Mills's impact, the deliberate machination of the minds of the British imperials, how to dominate, destroy the very rich cultural heritage, intellectual, spiritual heritage of Bharat.
Yeah.
and this one. And then Sri Aurobindo rising up against it. The bourgeois was the Congress culture or the Bhadralok that you talked about. This is a history which the Congress party suppressed, and I'm being political about it here.
Yeah.
Because there are times when you have to confront the truth, and I loved it when Sri Aurobindo says it in his book or in the article. You have to confront the truth, the ugly reality. If you do not confront, you end up being lethargic, accepting, surrendering, and you do not do that. So, for the benefit of the listeners, to viewers today, I want to read some of those portions of that article because I will not be able to do justice to Sri Aurobindo's work if I do not read them out to you at this point in time, and with a hope that it will propel you, will motivate you to go back to Google and read it. So here is what uh, Sri Aurobindo says, and I'm reading from that article. What is the bourgeois? For the word is unknown in India. This is the article written in 1907. Think about it. Though the thing is so prominent, the bourgeois is the average contented middle class citizen who is in all countries much the same in his fundamental character and habits of thought, in spite of pronounced racial differences in temperament and self expression. He is a man of facile sentiments and skin deep personality, generally enlightened. Think about what Kundanji said about the Bhadralok dilemma. You know, I am so enlightened. We are culturally superior, right? That's what is important to remember that. But not inconveniently illuminated. In love with his life, his ease, and above all things, his comforts, he prescribes the secure maintenance of these precious possessions as the first indispensable condition of all action in politics and society. Do you see yourself being reflected in these statements? Do you see yourself noticing why Indians always are seeking peace? No disturbance, let's not disturb the equilibrium. Let's let things be as they are. That's what is important, the bourgeois. And that's what he said about samurai. He said that both Japan and India were very severely dominated by the European mindset and European infiltration. The Japanese maintained their historical ethos. They learned something, they made some changes, but maintained their historical ethos. Whereas we gave in to the British domination, which led to Indians resisting transformation or change. And that's where it has had, Sri Aurobindo said, these are his words, that European culture had powerful disintegrating and destructive influences on India. Do you see what Rahul Gandhi is doing? Think, 1907, Sri Aurobindo said, the destructive and disintegrating influence of the British culture, European culture, you are seeing Rahul and his cohorts still practicing that. So, Kundanji, it's my show, but you are the guest, and I want people to hear from you because I am a learner. You are already learned, so please educate us all about this part. Thank you.
So, Vibhuti ji, first of all, when we connected and when we started talking about, we both believe in this paradigm of collaboration. So we are collaborating and we are having a dialogue here, and
Yes.
and we are talking about, an individual whose contribution for India's resurgence has been massive. He is increasingly getting realized, but still there's ways to go. He has not been given his due even today. And we will get into the causes of why that has happened as well. So, you were talking about the Congress propensities. You have a political background. I have a scholarly background. So I will get into the reasons why this has happened, I would actually say that it is basically the same mindset that Shri Aurobindo has addressed in the article, which basically rules India's scholarship. And I would say, continues to rule India's scholarship. It is that bourgeois mindset. And it is basically because of that bourgeois mindset that we are not able to get into the very roots of our tradition. You know, we need to understand that since antiquity, we have had a cosmology which has been unfolded to us through a series of rishis that we have had. And all these rishis, interestingly, they have built upon one another. It's a very comprehensive cosmology when you look at all the various darshana systems that we have. Of course, beginning with James Mill, there was a concerted effort on the part of the Britishers to say that all these various traditions are disconnected from one another. They are disparate. But they are not actually disparate. They are beautifully woven together. All that one needs to do is basically, as one studies one's tradition or parampara, have the flexibility in one's mind and heart to go into other traditions also. And if one is constantly inviting the grace of the divine, this beautiful tapestry begins to unfold. In fact, at a fundamental level, there are not one too many contradictions between Vedanta and Buddhism also. Just a couple, and you will find more divergences, more convergences than divergences. But then, it's like if you would want to remain a Buddhist, then of course, it's like you are not going to get into the nitty gritty of Vedanta. And if you remain a Vedantin, then you would not understand the details of Buddhism. It is only by rising beyond, the paramparas at times that we are able to see these interconnections. In the Indian universities at this point in time, are we talking about this cosmology? Have we critiqued sufficiently the Western cosmology? Have we critiqued sufficiently the Western methodology of knowledge pursuit? Have we looked into our own darshana systems from our own vantage point? These are some of the questions that we really need to ask. Let me unfold this further. The Western cosmology uses two sets of faculties to pursue knowledge: the sense organs and mind. When you predominantly use your sense organs, what is it that you get? You get science, which is run by this philosophy called positivism. Positivism, in simple terms, says what is real is that which can be explored through the five senses. What cannot be explored through the five senses, it is not even real. And then you have rationalism, which says that reason is the ultimate through which knowledge can be gained. And then there's another tradition, where reason and the senses come together, and that philosophy is called logical positivism. When you look into our own traditions, our own systems of thought, across the board. What is it that you find? There's a knowledge that has to be gained that is beyond your senses and mind. And therefore, in all our yogic traditions, you find a very systematic method of going beyond the senses and mind. It is by going beyond the mind and senses that a certain knowledge was revealed. Does that knowledge have legitimacy in the Indian university system at this point in time? No. You know, even when we are looking at the colonization that India has undergone and the consequences of colonization, we are looking at the situation through the Western lens. We have not really critically examined the cosmology as well as what we call as the epistemology of knowledge pursuit within the western part of the world. Why are we considering this as the ultimate? It's not that that our system does not have critique of knowledge pursuit through mind and senses. We certainly do have. So, there are many things that have to be brought into conversation. And I would say that the bourgeois mindset that Shri Aurobindo is talking about is still at work. It is at work even in scholars who want to revive the Indian traditions. We are not paying sufficient attention to the cosmology and epistemology that we have. In fact, when we look at our cosmology and epistemology, all the Western denunciations, they start operating.
I will come to you with a very small proposition which is there in this article, bourgeois and the samurai, when Sri Aurobindo writes that the Japan remained faithful to its ancient spirit, the spirit of samurai. Learn, adopt, assimilate to advance your own culture. Compared to that, Bharatiyas, Indians, gave in for status quo, maintaining the contented with what we have. Ram Bharose. I mean, I'm using Ram Bharose as a phrase, not as anything else. So the question here is, at what point in time did we become totally subjugated? Because you have done work on John Mills. Shri Aurobindo, you are a follower. His picture is right behind on your right hand shoulder. So the question here is, at what point did we do this? And since post-independence India, he was totally suppressed. Even today, in 2025, we see the same colonial mindset out to destroy Bharat. It has not changed.
Yeah.
So the question again here is, will Bharat succeed in preserving and persevering with his culture, regain its lost values, lost moorings, or we will just let ourselves be floating? देखते हैं कारवां निकल गया गुबार कौन सा गाना है कारवां गुजर गया गुबार देखते रहे. That's the point which I am more concerned about it, because I believe, and I say this with great pride, this century belongs to us. It's for us to take it forward. Nobody will do it for us.
Yeah.
Nobody will do it for us.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we inspire our fellow listeners, viewers who are listening and viewing these things with great interest?
Yeah.
And so the point is, how do we inspire them for the next stage?
Vibhuti ji, the resurgence will happen. It is because of the work that our rishis have done. You know, what was the challenge that India posed, to these colonizers when it came to the colonization of our mind through education? There was an emergence of many greats, beginning with Sri Ramakrishna. You had Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekanand, Raman Maharshi, Paramhans Yoganand, Shri Aurobindo, the mother, within a very short span of time. I would say that we should never lose sight of that fact. That's number one. Number two, you know, in the field of scholarship, there are not one too many, but there are some madcaps, like me, who will continue pushing.
May
You know,
your tribe grow. I would add
yes, it has to grow. It has to
here.
grow. The Britishers called Sri Aurobindo a madman as well, and I don't use it. It's like in the conventional sense. What I'm saying is that amongst us there will always be some unconventional people, you know, who by the grace of the divine, by the grace of these gurus, have come in contact with what India really stands for. Who have done the sadhana to understand what India really represents. And when you look at India amongst the comity of nations, India is absolutely unique. There is no civilization which says that there is just one that has become many, and the human beings, through their own spiritual practices, through their own yogic practices, can know that one, can know that he or she is nothing but that divine which is manifesting in multiplicity. This is a very tall order. And this is something which makes the Indian civilization absolutely unique. And I would say that it is basically Sanatana Dharma, which, in today's time, which has the vision for people and nations existing with one another peacefully. There's no other civilization which, incidentally, has that worldview. I'm not saying that the world has to follow Sanatana Dharma. I'm not saying that. They can continue to do what they want to. But this Sanatana Dharma has to arise, has to come back, which actually reminds me, of uh, another piece by Shri Aurobindo. It's called the Uttar Para speech. I do not know whether your viewers are aware of this. Uh, for his revolutionary activities, Sri Aurobindo was incarcerated. He was in jail for a year. And he had undergone a trial under the charges of sedition against the British Empire. The Britishers were not able to find uh, any evidence for their charges, and then he was let go. And within this 1 year, Sri Aurobindo underwent profound spiritual transformation, including a visitation by Swami Vivekanand, who had already left his body 7 or 8 years ago, and the vision of Krishna. He saw Krishna everywhere. These were two experiences that were profoundly transformative. And when Sri Aurobindo came out of the Alipore jail, he was requested by his fellow revolutionaries to address a crowd. And that happened in Uttarpada. And Shri Aurobindo is very categorical in saying that India's renaissance will happen through the rise of Sanatana Dharma. But Sanatana Dharma, and I am adding to this, not in monasteries, not in social media. Sanatana Dharma where it actually matters, which is in the university system. I'm again going back to this. We have a cosmology, we have an epistemology. Why is it that these things are not being taught at a wider level? So there's a lot of work that has to be done within the field of academia. There are so many people doing commendable work in other fields. I would say that Indian academia still remains untouched, and that is where this bourgeois mindset is massively at work. This bourgeois mindset has to be critically examined scholastically. That is one of the challenges that we are facing.
There comes a moment in time in life, it's like you asking a sportsman, last 5 minutes are remaining and you are a goal down. At that time, you don't go back to the coaching field because you have to do it on the ground now.
Yeah.
Your play is being dictated. You have to take advantage of the opportunity. In American football, it's called the last 2-minute drill, correct? You have to do that. So beyond intellectualize, I totally see the point that you are trying to say, and you have said it many times, and I respect your belief totally, and I agree with that there has to be an academic refutation by Indian academicians, which is not happening because of the bourgeois mindset that has come there, and the onslaught of the political system in which suppressing the Sanatan part of it. By the way, to the listeners and everybody else, I want to say this, and I've said this in my conversation with Sanjay ji as well, and I repeat, this century belongs to Sanatan Dharma and Bharat. It's for us to take this forward. To that end, I have started a Sanatan World YouTube channel, just started it kind of a thing, very slow start. Urge you to go back and visit it. I've begun to question certain essentials. So last one I did was, how lucky am I to be born a Sanatani? And I've said it in very simple terms. I also follow Albert Einstein's very simple quotation that any intelligent fool can complicate a simple problem. It takes courage to move in the other direction. So I'm trying to simplify things. I believe in that statement. I say, let's stop philosophizing and complicating. Let's simplify to move forward. To that end, I'm totally with you on that. Unless and until that academic work is done, like you showed in your book, the Indian American children remain colonized in the sense the way the colonization happened. If we don't know that, we won't address. So the why, knowing the problem as a why, then only you can find the how and the what to do. So the other part which I wanted to also ask you in this one, Aurobindo was very critical. I mean, the man, the way he wrote was just about amazing. Like he said, no acceptance of anything Western. Assimilate, accept, but don't surrender. These are so powerful thing that just accommodate to do that, and that's what he talked about samurai. We ended up endangering ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly. So the point of the matter is, how will the modern population of 21st century, which, as some people say, suffers from serious case of ADHD, attention, nobody reads books anymore. Our conversation will lead to certain people getting charged up. हम कौन थे, क्या हो गए और क्या होंगे अभी, आओ विचारे आज मिलकर ये समस्याएं सभी। मैथिली शरण गुप्त की कविता बिल्कुल रेलेवेंट है हर एक टाइम के लिए।
बिल्कुल
करेक्ट।
जी।
Tell us something about that. As a professor in a classroom, and we are all students in front of you, where do we go from here? What do we do?
जी so much in tandem with what he has written in the bourgeois and the samurai. By the way, that is an article before his profound
Yes,
spiritual transformation.
correct, correct.
Now, I'm going to read out to you something which has happened after his spiritual transformations, and he had already become a yogi. I'm actually quoting from the foundations of Indian culture.
Hmm.
This is what he writes. He says that conflict is indeed not the last and ideal stage, for that comes when various cultures develop freely without hatred, misunderstanding, or aggression, or even with an underlying sense of unity. Their separate motives. But so long as the principle of struggle prevails, I'm underlining this, but so
Hmm.
long as the principle of struggle prevails, one must face the lesser law. It is fatal to disarm in the midmost of the battle. The culture which gives up its living separatedness, the civilization which neglects an active self defense, will be swallowed up, and the nation which lived by it will lose its soul and perish. You know, Vibhuti ji, the malaise that you were talking about, that malaise also is a manifestation of the same bourgeois mindset. We are saying that people are not interested in reading books. Let's think about our civilization. Let's think about the umpteen manuscripts, millions of manuscripts that are still untranslated in various Indian languages, including Sanskrit. Where did they all come about? How did they come about? Till a certain point in time, this civilization believed in intellectual pursuits. It is still there within the civilization. It has to be rekindled, it has to be brought back. The answer certainly is not becoming anti intellectual. Sadhana can be done through intellect as well. This is something that we need to rediscover. Our ancestors, while they were engaging in intellectual pursuits, they were also doing the sadhana.
Hmm.
They never lost sight of the fact that we are one, and experiencing that one, that unity with that one, is the ultimate gain, is the ultimate destination. But that can be done, through intellectual pursuits as well. The question here is that if we will start creating the right conditions, the conducive atmosphere for this, it will begin to happen. You know, it is part of our collective unconsciousness. It has not gone away, it has not dwindled. The moment we start creating conditions, we will start rekindling the spirit. And see, the thing is that, you know, given that we both believe in diversity of perspectives and plurality of ways, there will be many ways through which, this will be done. There will be people, who will be having conversations on social media. For people who want to learn, you know, by listening to things. But there are still people who would want to hold a book in hand and enjoy the process. In fact, when we were young, when we were in college, you would remember that there were not one too many scholars amongst us. The culture of studying and reading, for the sake of knowledge, disappeared from India a long time ago. It was prevalent in our younger days as well.
Yeah,
It has not changed. But it was not the situation in our ancient times.
right. No, during our time, it was known that you are known by the books you read, right? We had my generation had the culture of reading books. Look, I want to say something to the viewers, and that this is a continuing conversation, because this awakening needs to happen. And this is very critical. I'll tell you something which is a very personally gratifying to me. There are moments this media enables us share something. So those of you who have been hearing me and be paying attention, I have always said that one of the key lessons of learning and studying Mahabharata and Ramayana was, for me, is that you always bear the consequences of the choices and decisions you make. No character has been called a bad guy. Dronacharya, Bhishma Pitava were not looked down upon because they were fighting for Kauravas,
Yeah.
but they bore the consequences of their choice and the decisions they make. You know why I say this today? And there's a story in Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Ramayana as well, any number of them. Recently, I saw two movies: Superman, the latest version, and Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. My son and I were watching that movie, and lo and behold, I heard my statement, what I said to you just now, that we bear the consequences, the choices and decisions we make, quoted in that movie, I won't say quoted, said in that movie, both the movies. And my son laughed. He said, Dad, that's totally impressive that Superman and Mission Impossible Final Reckoning talks about the same thing, almost identical. That's what our ancient wisdom is all about, the universal truth. That's Sanatan. So, Kundanji, very glad you joined in. I'm very passionate about this subject, as you know. I believe Sanatan is the future, is for us to take forward. And I want to close this conversation with two things, two suggestions. One is that Kundanji and I will be talking about this and subject matter, taking forward the various issues, the academic, the practical, the spiritual, and the realistic Shri Aurobindo's Bhashan. But here is what I'm quoting you, is one of the statements in the article Bourgeois and the Samurai. He says, it is the spirit of the man's, it is the spirit of the man that determines a man's fate. And it is the spirit of a nation which determines nation's history. So where are you in that spirit? Think about it. I'm very much excited to take that message forward. Are you? As I always say, Satyameva Jayate, for truth to triumph, you need to stand up and fight for it. And that's what we are doing. Kundaji, thank you very much for joining today. And I will, working around your convenience, we will do once in 3 weeks or once in 4 weeks a session on these elements of Sri Aurobindo, because he was profound. Thank you very much for joining today, viewers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.